From OFS, I'm Doug Shapiro. This is the Imagine a Place podcast, where we explore the power of place and the role of design in our lives. I'm really happy you're here. I'm here with Chris Stulpin. It's 10 years now.
I know. I can't believe it.
I know. Chris, you're the Chief Creative Officer for Mosaic Companies.
I am.
You're also so well known in this industry.
No, I don't know.
I'm wondering what mysteries are in there.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming to my home. This it's truly an honor to have you here because I love, if you know me, I love nothing more than hosting people in my home, feeding them, and making memories. So thrilled to have you.
Thank you. You've been so good to me. Such a great place. There's so much going on here that I want to explore. But I want to get into things that are important to you. And I think we can learn a lot from you, given your history and given what I know about you. And that's the thing, is I think you have an identity out in the world. People know you one way, but you're also an executive. You're incredibly intelligent. And I want to get inside your head and share that with the world.
I'm here for it. I am here for it.
So Chris, what matters to you?
Oh, wow. That's lovely opener. That's not hard at all. I will tell you the thing that drives me both personally and professionally is I think a motif in my life has been the idea of the underdog and the underrepresented. So I think that's what matters the most to me, is that voices are heard that are either underestimated or discounted.
Okay, so How did you get there? I mean, is this like something that's been this theme in your life, or is this something that's new to you?
Yep. No, it's always been that way, and I think it's because of the generation I was born into. You have to realize that I'm shocked where we are today. To be perfectly frank, I would have thought we would have been much more evolved over these past decades, and it's highly disappointing to me, as I have a very distinct memory. My aunt used to live with us, and my parents both worked, and there was a call from the school that my aunt had to come and pick my sister and I up from our school because there were going to be race riots. So that's how far back I go in terms of understanding the underrepresented. And for the life of me, it's been the driving force in terms of understanding the Black experience, the gay experience, the differently abled experience, the Asian experience, and so on and so forth. So I've always had this very, very strong identification throughout my life with that. I'll tell you a fun fact, something that you probably don't know about me, that part of my higher education, which sort of flummoxed my whole family, was I made a decision to go to an all-deaf university. And I was one of 10 hearing people in a college, NTID, of all deaf people and all deaf teachers. And that also really was a significant part of who I am, because it was so immersive in terms of trying to fit in when you have typically fit in. So what's the opposite of that?
So this choice, at what age did you make this choice?
I made that choice when I was 10 years old. My parents had divorced, and my mom and I, it was a summer, and we were invited to someone's place in it was called Thousand Islands in upstate New York. And I was 10-year-old kid with a bunch of adults. Someone had a book there. It was called Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which was a very adult book, which was then made into a movie with Diane Keaton and Richard Gere. I won't tell you from the eyes of a 10-year-old, she taught sign language. She was a sign language teacher to the deaf. Now, mind you, a 10-year-old reading this adult novel. Thankfully, I didn't understand the other parts, which thank God I didn't. But I was like, I want to do that, and it was the most amazing experience that I have continuously been able to play out in my career. Because it's called TC, total communication, and it's not just finger spelling, or it's not just signing. It is in fact reading an entire body. I'm going to give you an example, and do not blush. This is the sign for beautiful, right? Beautiful, you're beautiful. I could go, you're hot. It's the same sign, but it's what you bring with the face, it's what you bring with the lips, and it's what you bring with the hand. And if you take that, we're constantly, as human beings, evaluating the entire person. So I got to do that in a very, very specific way, to learn how to communicate on a different level.
Wow.
And there's a certain amount of empathy that you read. And understanding that listening means truly understanding not just the words coming out, but the intent and how they're delivered.
That's amazing. I mean, you have always had a way of reaching people. But put that aside, I mean, understanding people is far more important. And if I even just reflect on my history and my moments with you, I can see what you're saying. I can feel that history that you have in our relationship and my experiences with you when I think about those. What a phenomenal and different experience and challenge to put yourself in. Obviously, this voice, understanding this voice, searching for those voices that aren't heard, are important to you. Do those play a role in the way you carry out your business activities every day? I mean, does this influence your career? Does it influence your daily activities, your decisions?
Oh, absolutely. I found myself in this industry. I started out as a librarian at an architectural firm. And to think that I could start from what I felt was such a wonderful place, because it was about learning, about materials and all of that, and then having the opportunity to transfer to what we call is the other side of the industry, right, the manufacturing side, but still bring that experience of design into that, and all of these other motifs that keep reoccurring in my life. And it's been a joy to bring opportunity to those, because I feel like I'm constantly trying to repay for all of the advantages that I had by people believing in me, right? We're in the best industry in the world, and I think it's because we believe in one another to a certain extent.
Yeah, I feel that.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So you have to keep that going, right? And it is my job to, and I love engaging with people young in career on my own teams, and those that we would consider clients, right? So how can I take all of this stuff that I've been giving and keep paying it forward so it continues in a generational way?
And for some time, I feel like I was one of those mentees that got to learn from you, and where you opened up, your mind and your resources to help me grow. But I also feel like I got to know your identity some, and I want to get into your identity because
Sure.
I think there's a lot of people that know you on the surface. You're very funny, right? We know this, okay? And you're very charismatic, but you're also an executive, right? There's a whole branch of activities that I think that you manage that I'm even still learning about you. How do you balance your identity? What is your identity out there in the world?
Here's the part of the question I'll answer, right? Of how do you bring something that's a non-traditional personality to a leadership role for billion-dollar companies? It's not. It's not typical, and I'll tell you that, and it's such an overplayed word, but empathy, right? I truly believe in empathy and design thinking, and so when I'm building teams, it's truly understanding and again listening versus talking. Do you know what leadership isn't? Leadership is not being the person to tell you what to do. Leadership is allowing you to flourish. Think about that, right? The gentleman who I have respected the most in my career from a business standpoint is a gentleman I'm working for now, and his name is Glenn Morrison. And Glenn saw something in me that he valued, and that was my ability to lead people, to create teams and lead people.
Let's talk about leadership specifically, because leadership in 2021 looks different for many people than leadership in the past. Have you changed how you lead? Have you reevaluated how you lead? I think most business leaders today have undergone, I don't think an epiphany is too light of a word to use in today's world.
Yeah, no, it's funny because All right, so yeah, what is leadership? It's truly it's building culture, right? And it's living the culture that you want to have manifested in your organization for success. It's a lot of I have big struggle with some of these things in terms of we get hired to go to jobs. Make no mistake about it. It's for those companies to be successful. We're not being hired so we can have health and wellness. There's profit, there's success, there's all sorts of other things. All of the other stuff is culture. So if you're the employee, you have to understand you are being hired to perform, to make that company sustainable and successful. So you do owe that, right? To bring that. Now,
Sure.
What the company can bring to you is the atmosphere in which you can thrive. So when we talk about culture, I think a lot of people talk out of both sides of their mouth. It's a platitude that they're like, yes, we have to have a culture. And you see all this stuff on LinkedIn. And very few people are doing it. So you have to have leaders. Oh my God, can we talk about something?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know, like, in your head about leadership, like what's changed for you in leadership.
And I've been thinking a lot about the word bias. So bias is something we don't really talk about.
Let's go there. Yeah.
Can we?
Yeah, let's go there.
All right. I'm going to give you a scenario that happened this week. I arrived about 10 o'clock at night at the Cleveland airport. Charlie and the dogs were away. I was coming home to stay here by myself, which is unusual for me. And I was taking a cab home. And I had this idea of, Doug, I chat everybody up, so I'm learning about this person, and we get to our location. Now, if you were in the same scenario with this taxi driver and you landed to your home and you were the only one there, and that person said, I'm so sorry to ask you this, but may I use your restroom? What would your response be?
Oh boy. I would have. This is tough. Okay.
Yeah.
But, that's a dangerous time, and it's a, I would just say you could go outside. I got a tree.
So let me help you out.
I'd be nervous. I would be nervous.
All right. So let me help you out. In that scenario that I just detailed, I said it was a taxi driver. What did you conjure in your head?
Oh boy.
Who was it? What did that person look like?
Probably my last Uber driver. I don't know. Yeah.
So bias is, what if I had said my taxi driver was a 67-year-old woman? Or what if I said that taxi driver was a black man with the Black Lives Matter, or a white man with a Make America Great Again, or, right? But I didn't say any of that. You conjured up something in your head which was normal, which was a bias, right?
Sure.
And there's good biases and bad biases, and bias lives in the same family as discrimination and prejudice. Here's the thing. We all have to admit that we are wired to have biases. So when I think about what we're trying to do to build space, or to build culture, or leadership in the world that in which we live, we have to first admit that if we all say we have bias, then what do we need to do next to connect, find common ground, and then move forward? Because we are always going to have bias. So I think it's a very interesting concept that we have to start exploring. Because how are we going to design for the future, right? When everything can't be based on everybody, even though we all want it to be in our heads, our workspace, a reflection of ourselves. Well, step one, you got a job in order to make that company profitable. The company can give back to you by building a culture in which you can thrive and in which is a great place to work. So we both have to have that shared agreement. Then we both have to understand that in order to make that culture good, we all come from a different place of bias. And where can we all find a common ground? And so often it's a small group of people that sometimes share the same biases and don't represent everybody in the firm. So how do you get those voices to be heard?
Right.
I came from parents and grandparents who all worked from Eastman Kodak. I grew up in Rochester, New York. And Kodak was the biggest thing. It was one of the top 3 brands in the whole world, right? People used to have phones and film. The cameras, film. You'd go to develop, right? And I came from 2 generations of folks that all worked there, and their value proposition was they were going to go in and do that because they wanted this American dream of a suburban house and have a couple of kids and all of that. I don't know if they necessarily thought about work-life balance, if they thought about, some of these things that we are now thinking about. So that evolution has happened in workplace, and certainly what my parents and grandparents experienced is not what underserved people experienced in the same thing, although their motives were the same.
Okay.
Right. So I think we have to understand what are our motives for working. Think about that, right? Why do you go to work?
Yeah, I mean,
You have a beautiful family.
I do. I do have a beautiful family.
So do you do it for the money, or are you doing it for the family?
It's
Or a little bit of both?
it's got to be a little bit of both, I suppose. It's hard to
Or are you doing
separate
it for
them all.
for self-satisfaction?
And there's that too, and community, right?
Yeah.
And legacy.
Legacy is a big one as well.
So many things that create purpose behind what you do. Boy, if it's one-dimensional, that would feel like a pretty difficult life to wake up to every day. If All
right. So we've established it's money, it's family, it's legacy. I want all people from all diverse backgrounds to have that same opportunity.
Gosh, I agree.
So
I agree.
Let's talk about bias more and understand that we all do it, and it's okay, because guess what? There's good bias too. There's good bias and there's bad bias. There's actually discrimination that protects us. There's prejudice that can be good or bad. So if we start to understand those words, and so what's a good discrimination? We have age discrimination against children in the workforce, right? So that's a good discrimination, but it is a discrimination against young people because we need to protect them, right? So when you hear those words, bias, discrimination, and prejudice, let's understand that it's a well-rounded word that has multiple meanings.
Okay.
I'm getting off my soapbox now because it went that way, but hey, what do I want? What do I want my legacy to be? I want my legacy to be that I allowed every voice to be heard that I could, not only in which the teams that I built, but within the people that I've interacted with.
Well, I love that from the very beginning, you started down that path. The idea of your choice in schools, and how you went to educate yourself, and you were born looking for this. I feel like, Chris. I'm gonna go in a different direction.
Yeah,
a little more lighthearted. You're known, I think, for many things, but your humor is one of them, right? I mean, you make the people around you laugh. I think humor plays an important role in business, in relationships, in being human. What's the role of humor in your life, in your work?
All right. I have to share. I don't know if you were there. There was a huge watershed moment in my life, and it had to do with IIDA. And it had to do with this event at NeoCon that's a black tie event. And I was one of the presenters. And so I was also the audience, but I got to announce one of the awards. And I am telling you, we all sat in this thing for years with the same thought bubble of kill me now over our heads. And we're like, this isn't a celebration. This is like, oh my God, what's happening here? It's so serious, and we are in the best industry in the world, the most blessed best industry in the world. Celebration wasn't playing into it. So I had to get up and read this thing from a teleprompter, and I am telling you, it was long, and it was belabored. And I was like, I can't do this how they want me to do this. I was like, I have to do this how I want to do this, and this is going to be a huge risk. And I started to, there was a microphone like this, and I was like, 1 second, and I was taking breaks, and I was like, palming my head, and I'm reading this long description before these people finally got their friggin' award, and people were rolling on the aisles because it reflected everything that they sensed. And the more that I got from that audience in that one moment was like, oh my God, these are my people. We all are thinking we've got to change this. Lo and behold, that next year I was asked to host it, and it was something I really looked forward to because I love our industry and I live, eat, sleep, breathe design, and I wanted it to be a celebration. So I wanted to change the energy. And make it something that we could look forward to, as opposed to I have to sit here in a tuxedo for 3 hours and I just really want to talk with my friends and I want to make jokes, and I tried to be that voice for those people in the audience who felt the same way. Humor is also a way that I use in my teams to. Oh gosh, I'm going to use this phrase because I'm without words. To take the piss out of highly charged situations. Sorry, it's not the most eloquent.
Sure.
But and then it changes the energy. Humor definitely changes the energy, and you can still be professional. You still have to listen, and you still have to be empathetic, and there are lines. Right? It can't be self-serving. I don't do it to be self-serving. I do it to serve the situation.
I think serve the situation is a good choice of words. And it's kind of interesting how you tied humor to empathy in this scenario at the gala that you were speaking at, because you delivered what people were feeling. And I think that's part of what humor is. It's like capturing a moment that everybody can relate to.
Yeah.
And putting it out there, it has more to do about that and about truth and empathy than it does being funny per se,
Yeah.
And so I do think that there is something very human about humor, and when you've got it and when you can capture those moments, I think it's because usually you have a great sense of empathy. And so it's almost like those two for you, and I think for so many people, are probably very tied together.
Yeah. So I think on Facebook, right, which
heard of it.
Older generations use Facebook. About 3 years ago, I was just like, it was hard. It was really hard during certain years. Past 4 years, it's been really difficult. A lot of contentiousness and hate and divisiveness, and I saw it manifesting in my own family. People going after one another, and I was like, oh, this is not fun. And so in my little pea brain, I decided to create something called the Happiness Project, right? And every morning I would wake up, and I do this still to this day, 3 years later now, where I've curated the most insane, ridiculous images that I post between 6 and 7 a.m. every morning, 7 days a week, 365, in order to start people's day. So the first thing that they see is this image of ridiculousness. There's typically no comment attached to it. It's just an image. And it was for me. It was selfish because I just needed to do that for myself. To take away all of this other stuff that I was seeing that was so negative. And I can tell you, it's been one of the best things in my life.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why, because I get DMs, I get texts, I get all of this stuff from people that say, I look forward to waking up to see what you are posting because it makes me happy every day. And to be able to give that gift of humor or joy to start your day off I think it's a much better value proposition than saying, look what I read in the news today and how dare they,
sure,
no matter what side of the fence you're on. Or you can see this ridiculous thing and go, he's at it again.
Yes. I mean, the world needs that. Okay, this is the moment where the delicious smells that were drifting out of Chris and Charlie's kitchen were reaching the point of irresistibility. They treated me and our sound and video guru, Curtis, to a first-class lunch. Curtis, what'd you think of the meatballs?
Well, Doug, they were full of meat, which is my only requirement when eating meatballs. They were fantastic. The flavor was amazing. It felt like I was at my grandma's house eating, which was weird because we were at Chris's house.
Thank you. What a delicious lunch. You guys cooked all that for us. I'm so honored.
Yeah, and there's going to be a bill at the end of this. This was not a free lunch.
There's no such thing.
No. Listen, if you know me, and I know you do, and if you see any of my feeds and my socials, a huge passion is food. Food extends to hospitality, and it's really a manifestation of relationships and memories are at this table. So I am so glad you could be a part of it. And who doesn't like a good meatball?
Yes, yeah. I've
natural.
Heard you get welcomed into the world by a smile, a hug, a look in the eye, and then something to eat.
And
right?
a meatball.
And a meatball, right? I mean,
it's pretty simple.
I would love to hear stories, because we had a chance to just share some stories over lunch, which were fantastic.
I have a good story for you.
Okay.
All right. I was very early in career, and I worked for the third largest design firm in the world. It was called the Walker Group. They used to design things called shopping malls, which no longer exist. They're gone, right? And it was like one of the coolest places in New York City to work at. And I was the lowly librarian, because we used to call them librarians back in the day. But because I worked for a big firm, everybody wanted to know me. And, what they didn't want to know was that I wanted to know about them. And it wasn't just about business, but I got to really understand materials and all of that stuff, and meet other colleagues who were librarians. And we all got together one day and we're like, you know what? We're more than the entry-level position in terms of how we're impacting design. So we started a group called the Association of Resource Specialists. And we decided to reclaim what we were doing from librarian, which had a negative connotation, and to some extent still does today. Like, oh, I can't get past the librarian, to understand what a resource specialist would do. So I'm doing this for this very cool firm, very popular. Life is good. I get an opportunity to make a shift in my career. There's a firm called HLW Architects. They're the oldest architecture firm in North America.
Wow.
And back in the day, this is going to sound so radical, but back in the day, they worked Mondays through Thursdays from 8 to 5, and those were the extended hours. And I was like, wait a second, I'm going to get paid more money and work 4 days a week. I was like, let's do this. And so I went to work for HLW and made friendships that I still hold dear today throughout my tenure there. But it was like, what do you do in your 20s in New York on your fifth day when you typically would be working? I decided to start my own business, and I was a professional resource specialist that would consult to companies. I'm going to give you an idea. This will blow your mind. There was a new firm starting up that hired me to build their resource library. It was called Fox and Fowl, which is now FX Fowl.
Sure.
There was another firm called Perkins and Eastman that was an upstart that had their first office, and they asked me to come in and build. So I literally got to build these resource libraries of some of the largest firms that we're now, that
Sure.
we call on and that we know. And the point of the story was, let them call you whatever they call you. and then you tell them who you are and what your value is, and then you capitalize on it.
I love that.
Doesn't matter what they call you.
Yeah. I love that. and you know, just being the best version of whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
I love that. That's kind of funny that you're right at the cusp of Perkins Eastman, you know, FX. Well, now it's FX Collaborative. They've gone through another rebrand since then.
Absolutely.
And to kind of see your impact there. That's interesting. I mean, you moved over to the manufacturing side at some point. Was there a revelation? Was there some sort of a path that just seems pretty standard and boring, or was this like a big aha moment?
Listen, I was super passionate, love what I did, was held in high esteem for what I did, and I worked with amazing people, got to work on amazing projects or participate in working on amazing projects. But at the end of the day, there's a part of me that's always been entrepreneurial, and it was, how do I create a better future for myself? And at that point, you remember we had some downturns in the economy in the 90s and that, and I was like, all right, so what do you want to do? Some really good advice my grandfather, who was that second generation Eastman Kodak gentleman, shared with me was, he's like, don't wait your entire career to retire. He said, find middle points in your career in which you can retire temporarily. And I will tell you, over my lifespan, I've taken off 3 years. Because I've planned for that.
That's a little scary, though, right? I mean, I'm sure the first time you did it, it was very scary because you worry like.
And they weren't due to layoffs. These were my choices, and I did it in my 20s, I did it in my 30s, and I did it most recently last year when my last day of work, when I decided to leave, was March 13th.
Oh, right, as the pandemic
It was the day that no one went back to work. So, but you do have to have a strong sense of self and value in which to do it. But I can tell you, it's entirely worth the gamble.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned advice. I mean, we'll talk about advice.
Okay.
We'll talk about some other things too. But that was one piece of advice you got. What else? What else came your way that was life-altering advice that you actually took and used?
Yeah. Truly in business, the best advice that I ever received, and it was from a dear friend. So when I left design, my very first job that I went into in manufacturing was with Interface, and there was a legendary salesperson, because I worked at the New York office. I was in something called creative services, and it was tied to product development and marketing, so, which I know is an extension of who I am today in this, role of chief creative officer. But his name was Joe Zaremba, and he just passed away. And I've been thinking about him a lot because I think I owe him a great debt. And it was 3 simple words that hold a lot of meaning. And he called me Stulpy. So now all of my closest friends call me Stulpy, not Chris or Stulpin. But he'd go, Stulpy, make new friends. So what did that mean? He'd say, hey, I heard so-and-so is just joined this firm, moved here from out of town. He's like, I want you to go make new friends, find out who they are. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Now, some of those people we all know who are stalwarts in our industry, and I know them because I took his advice and I made new friends. Because it's really hard when you're early in career to not be intimidated by a lot of things and people. But if you have blind confidence to make new friends and use that as your motto, it will really serve you well.
I love the blind confidence comment. And I kind of think that's what it takes, because it could be a little scary to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Okay. But that point of making new friends, I mean, everybody wants friends. I mean, even people who you may think are inaccessible, or operating at a different level, whatever it may be. I mean, they want friendship too, and they want the same things that everybody else wants. We all want validation and friendship, and I know you've been there for people, so that's great advice. How do you overcome that fear? Like, I don't know this. Were you always a very confident person, or?
No. I you know what? And it might seem that I'm a very confident person. What I am confident in, believe it or not, is in failure. I'm confident in failure. That is something I really like about myself.
Like, you've become comfortable with failing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it sounds so trite, but if you think it looks easy, or if it looks so achievable, you're not looking behind the curtain. It is literally a series of failures which lead to success or a life well led. Because it's really understanding, okay, well, why did that happen? And what did I learn from it? And learning that failure is not a bad thing. That's my biggest advice to people that are early in career. So when you said, wow, that had to be scary, taking off time and in your 20s or 30s, especially I was considerably successful in those periods, but I knew there was value in what my grandpa told me. So what did I have to lose?
Yeah, I mean,
and if I did, I would have learned from it, right? So what can you learn from failure?
Yeah, it's interesting. So many people I talk to, they almost can't help but bring up failure, especially people that others see as successful. They talk about failure. It's almost like it's just part of kind of why you are who you are.
It's so frowned upon, right? In Western society, that it's like, oh, did you hear he was fired or she was fired, or whatever that thing is. Who cares?
Yeah,
right?
Maybe they took
Literally,
a risk, right?
No, even if they didn't. What if they got fired? What if they were doing a bad job and they got fired? But that person learned from it and thrived from that.
Yes.
So you know what? Good for you. You got fired. I am happy for you, because if you really take that opportunity to understand, maybe do some self-reflection, maybe you were never going to succeed in that. And the learning experience was that they helped you get out of a bad situation, right?
Right.
There's all sorts of reasons, but again, as we just talked about, own that part of it, right? There's nothing wrong with failing as long as you learn from it.
So it's get comfortable with failure, and make new friends.
Make new friends.
Which to me,
totally.
it goes hand in hand, because, you might try to make new friends, and that might be a failure at times too. And then you move on, you keep trying.
Yeah.
I
5 years ago, no, actually, I'm going to go back to my Mohawk days when I was turned on to a company called Trend Union, led by Lee Edelcourt and Philip Famano, and I started going to their once-a-year talks. And Lee and Philip are some of the more well-known, if not the most well-known, forecasters. And we're not talking about this year's color is pink, right? No, what they do is they observe what's happening around in the world, and they make these connections. And in my mind, I call them, what are the macro trends, and they understand all of these things that are happening in the world, and they make sense of them, and then they plot them out into what we call trends. Innately, I think I've been doing that my entire life, but they opened up this whole new world for me. So that was in Mohawk, and I got to know them very well, and we did some amazing work at Mohawk. I went to Tarquette, and I got introduced to design thinking, and I got to study at the Paris School of Architecture's D School, where we had this crash course in design thinking. And we were talking about Legos earlier off camera, but I also got to go to Paris for a couple of days to play with professional Legos.
Nice.
So there are a set of Legos that they give you to understand and to communicate innovation, where you have to build complex scenarios out of a set of Legos.
So complex scenarios, meaning?
Meaning, how do you translate ideas by putting Legos together?
Wow.
Yeah. Also, a seminal moment that sort of blew my mind in terms of processing on on communication, innovation, and all of that sort of stuff.
So take a concept that's merely a concept and put it into three-dimensional physical form.
Right. So now you have young me understanding the body of the deaf and total communication, and then you have me, mid-career, understanding how to translate and communicate very complex ideas through building toys, right?
Wow.
Basically.
Like what would be an idea?
Oh,
that you had to, like, what was one of the builds you remember?
We were working on digital printing. Digital printing is an innovation for hard surface flooring. So, and the idea was build the process, and you only have like 5 minutes in which to do it because it's all about rapid iteration, was the idea about co-creation. So build co-creation, explain co-creation, go. You have 5 minutes, and you have these choices, and you have to put them together, and you're like...
I'm sure some people were probably paralyzed.
Absolutely. Totally,
I'm
totally
right now.
Freaks people out, right?
Sure.
I didn't care because, like I told you, I am comfortable failing.
Right.
Because guess what? There's nothing wrong with saying, no, that's not it. And then understanding why it's not it, and then going, if you have a few of those, you'll get to your aha moment. Right. And that's all you want to do. But if you think you're going to get it the first time, pack your bags up. Ain't happening.
Wow, what a wild experience. Are there any other, like, did you ever have like a big failure that you look back on and you say, oh my gosh, I think that one was, that was a true learning moment?
Yes, I had a series of failures. All right, so I told you there's this guy, Glenn, who I now work with, and we worked together in my last job. And I had this innovative idea. And I was so excited about it, and as many creatives are about their own projects and their babies, and you present it to him. And he looks at me, he's English, he's like, oh, that looks good. That's brilliant. How's it going to make me money? And I'm like, what? I'm like, but no, let's go back to the part where it's the brilliant idea. And that he's like, take it away and go figure out how to monetize it. Try to take an innovation and then put it through the process of creating a business. And that was a turning point in my career of how do I take innovation and turn it into a business. So I got the left side and the right side now. And we had so many iterations, and I had so many meetings with him that we're like, nope, didn't do it. Not yet. What about this, this, and this? And what he was doing it on purpose so I could learn.
Right.
And because he knew I was so passionate about this idea that I would eventually figure out how to monetize it, which I eventually did.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned something. You said when we were talking about trends.
Yeah.
You said you've been doing this your whole life. What do you mean by that? Like what exactly?
Oh, connecting.
Yeah.
It was about connecting the dots. Again, I prefer to come from a place of observation and learning than talking. Right. And
you don't have that option here. Okay, maybe you're proving something.
No, I'm just messing with you.
Oh, I had a funny note here. I said, what knowledge bombs can you drop?
Oh my God, what knowledge bombs? Do go to the parties, socialize, drink half as much as other people.
That's probably fantastic
For
advice.
For real. You will still have fun, but trust me, what you'll come away with is a lot more. It's called receipts and evidence.
20 years. Okay, 20 years as a creative. You got to tell me what keeps you excited about going to work every day?
I'm competitive, so winning, to be honest, it's terribly self-serving and not a polite answer to say, but I love winning. And winning for me means, listen, I don't know about you, but we have to submit a budget and we review it monthly, quarterly, EBITDA, all of that good stuff. I want to meet my goals, so I will move heaven and hell in which to reach them because I'm competitive. So that motivates me. I'm going to see if I can get this to be inclusive. Jane Hallinan, Angie Lee, Dylan Howe, Manny Navarro, and a list a mile long of people who are early in career. Can't wait to see what they're doing. Love playing with them. Love watching their careers bloom, blossom, and grow. So that next level of people, that used to be me. I can't wait. And how can I support them grow? Because I'd love to be part of their future.
I love that. And they need people like
and
you.
And Tara Headley.
Got to throw her in there, of course.
God. Yeah.
One of Atlanta's finest.
Yeah.
Okay. You and I were outside sharing a moment after our delicious lunch. We both reflected back on the last year and how both of us had been on the road so much. Oof, and that slowed down to a near halt for a while, right? And we both kind of rediscovered our marriage. Right?
Yes.
Tell me about that. Like,
oh my God. Well, we're both married to saints. Let me say that. And I feel like I know your wife, and obviously you walked in and you met Charlie finally, and you were like, Charlie, I feel like I know you, right? Because I constantly brag about him via the socials. So Charlie and I have been together for 18 years, and for 17 of those years, I've probably been away more than we've been together because of my work, and we made that work for us. And we had this last year together to spend every single day together, and oh my God, was it the best year of my life. Because as much as we truly, absence makes the heart grow fonder from traveling, and you truly value those weekends, or, if I was in town 3 days a week or 4 days a week, we got to spend and rediscover each other in such an amazing way. When we left New York for this opportunity to move to Ohio, it was a huge sacrifice on his part. Let me tell you, 6 years ago when we moved here, we were married legally in Connecticut and in New York. We moved here. We were no longer legally married. So imagine, Doug, you and your wife moved to Ohio from St. Louis, and you were no longer, in the eyes of the law, married.
I mean,
can you put your head around that?
I can't. I mean, I am
it's shocking that it would happen.
It's shocking. It feels like it must have been 60 years ago.
So when you hear me being so passionate about bias, right, and all of this, if you think it just happened to me in my youth, no, it still happens today, and it happens in so many death by 1,000 cuts for so many of our friends and colleagues. So that's where having understanding of all that. But going back to Charlie, he gave up his career for mine when we moved here. So to support me in my efforts. And if you want to know why I'm successful, it's because he's the most successful person I know. I mean, he's selfless in that respect, and you've seen him around the house here. And I could not do what I do without him. So,
well, I want to try to talk a little bit more about that transition to Ohio, and specifically marriage. I mean, it does feel like, I mean, if you're not in it every day, experiencing the bias and things that you've gone through, it feels like, oh, surely that couldn't happen, or that's some distant thing from 50 years. And it's like,
we moved from the liberal bubble of New York City to our property in which we're sitting, where when I got this new job, they said, do you want to move to Los Angeles, Atlanta, Miami, New York? And we said, nope, we like it here. So you've dug in. And we've come to embrace it.
Yes.
And we understand that while we fundamentally have major problems with different ideologies, we have managed to carve a lifestyle for ourselves here that's very enriching.
I can imagine. I just,
And guess what? What if we're helping to change hearts and minds? Guess what? I'd never be able to do that from my apartment in Chelsea.
Well, that's just very true.
So
I'm feeling what you're putting out there, and I'm moved by it. And I just can't help but, I guess, try to imagine those experiences you've had as my own. And it's, unless I think you've been through that, it's hard to even put your brain there.
You know what? Thank you for saying that. But so take away this. Anytime you look in anybody's eyes, not just my eyes, because I shared my story with you, know that everyone has those stories, right? That's why I'm so passionate about uncovering everybody's stories, because what is that common ground that we have? We've all gone through the human experience, the roller coaster of highs and lows. And maybe we don't agree on religion or politics or sporting groups, as I like to refer to them. But there's so many more other things that make us human that we can connect with.
All the big things, all the important things, right?
Yep.
Those are the things that are those, that what you said, common ground, those things that do make us human.
Yeah. And also come away with this, that I'm always right.
Nah.
Maybe just for now.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we would really appreciate a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. To discover more design stories, visit us at ofs.com/imagineaplace. From OFS, I'm Doug Shapiro, and you've been listening to Imagine a Place.